It is your body, it is you who's supposed to clean it.
Yeah.
Name body parts as they actually are.
Welcome to Being Human podcast with me, yours truly, Agnes Maggimbi. On this platform, we get to be vulnerable and share stories that affect us as human beings. And today we have a special guest in the building who is none other than...
Hi everybody, my name is 𝙃𝙪𝙢𝙖 Nakayenga and I am a human rights activist and a friend to Aggie, a friend of many years, and I'm excited to be on the Being Human podcast.
Welcome, Ivy.
Thank you.
It feels good to have you.
Good to have you too, finally. You know,
Finally.
We've been talking about being on the podcast together for a very long time, so I'm glad I'm here.
So it's so fulfilling that we have you on the show. Last podcast, we talked about how family affects us mentally, physically, and emotionally. And people are making comments, okay, the silent comments, because they did not really post them on the platform. But they were telling me to share more things that really go on in our family, especially African families, that really put us down. And we get to hear from your side of the story. I don't know how long you've lived. I don't know what happens in your family, or or hearsay. But yeah, so what really happens in our family that affects us emotionally, and you can highlight a few pointers and we just dive into that.
Okay, so I feel like because families are not perfect, all of us have experienced toxicity in families.
Yeah.
And the reason why we've experienced toxicity in families is because our families are not perfect and they are made up of human beings who are also not perfect.
Yeah.
But I also know that in families where they have not been intentional to heal or intentional to... There's the thing Christians always use to break chains and to stop generational curses, traumas and things like that. Yeah. So in those families where people are not keen on breaking those traumas, you find that as an adult who has grown up in such a family, you have so many challenges that then affect how you appear as a human being in society and as an adult human being in society. Yeah. One of the things I know people who have grown up in toxic situations experience is low self-esteem.
True that.
If you have grown up in a family where your voice is not heard, your opinions don't count, whenever you say something, it's shut down. Yeah. Definitely as an adult, you grow up with self-esteem issues. You grow up because you are not
you are not expressive.
You are not expressive, but also your opinion you were shown from a very young age that your opinion doesn't count, that how you exist as a human being doesn't count. So even as an adult, when you come into adulthood, that is the kind of person you're going to be. You're not going to be able to stand up and speak. You're going to
I've seen many adults.
Yeah, some people say, oh, me, I'm shy. But no, it's just a case of self-esteem. Like you can't stand in front of people to speak because you don't trust your word, right? And then another thing I've realized, people who've grown up in toxic families, is we have a lack of boundaries. You don't know how to set boundaries because your no when you were a kid didn't mean anything. Yeah. Your room, like people could just come and walk into your room, whether they've knocked or not. People could come and use your things, whether they've asked for permission or not.
I've not seen anything like first knock before you enter.
Exactly. Yeah. So of course, even you as an adult, you grow up, first of all, not respecting boundaries, other people's boundaries, but also you not having boundaries. So you find that people can easily walk all over you because you don't know how to say, no, this is the boundary, this is the point at which you're supposed to speak with me, or this is how you're supposed to talk to me, or when this is my property, you're supposed to ask for permission. So you also struggle with, with boundaries.
I think I've seen a lot of that, especially relationships that we have, friendships. I remember one time when, actually, this is between us, when I asked you for a book and you told me, Aggie, I don't lend out my the hard copy books. I remember I was like, wow. But if I were me, because there are certain things that I've done out of, I'm just being a nice person. But literally, it's an evidence of me lacking boundaries. So now when somebody puts like stringent boundaries, like your side of the story, I was like, wow, it was like a wake-up call of, wow, Tracy said no to me.
And setting boundaries doesn't mean you don't love the person.
Exactly.
It just means that for me, this is my one walk home. And other things, it will be so easy for you to get into those places. But for me, this is my boundary and I'm setting it.
Yeah, which most of us don't have. Even in relationships, you find that you've done a rebound of I don't know how many times with this guy because you fail to make your no an actual no. Okay, when I say no to him, maybe it will hurt him. And then also lacking boundaries, we try to inconvenience ourselves in respect of the other person. And it's not right.
Yeah, that actually makes me think about people pleasing.
Oh yeah.
I'm personally a recovering people pleaser. And let me tell you, if the journey is 100%, I think I'm at like 85 or 90%.
Well done.
Because generally, I think by virtue of being a firstborn, you somehow find that you develop tendencies of people
caring
pleasing.
about others.
You want everyone to be happy. You don't want to cause, conflict.
Yes.
But you realize that when you start creating boundaries, you stop pleasing everybody, because now I'm going to tell you no, and it's not going to make you happy. But I always have to catch myself and say, you know what, Tracy, you've said no to that person, you've laid down this boundary, and that's okay. Whether they are happy or unhappy with you, at least you're not doing things at the detriment of your happiness. Because you find that in people who've grown up in toxic families, they don't know, like they become people pleasers because you are only shown love when
After
you did something
good
that made another person happy. So once you did something that didn't make somebody else happy, then you are sidelined at home. So you find that you keep wanting to please people,
the other person
at the expense of your happiness. You find that you go out of your way, you stretch yourself too thin just because you want to make everybody happy. But if you realize, or if you want to track where that thing came from, it actually stemmed from your childhood.
Childhood trauma, you guys. It's a heavy load we carry. But the thing of people pleasing actually reminds me of certain things. You know, the basic chores we used to do at home, and you wake up and mop the house, and your parent only acknowledges after you've actually done something good. And if you've not, you won't get any praise. So we worked on proving ourselves, and I think it also creates the people pleasing scenario in our lives. But anyway, the other thing comes to manipulation. How toxic family dynamics have the element of manipulation. So from your experience, how have you encountered any scenarios? Have you been manipulated before? Manipulation reminds me of this. I don't know if it was manipulation. You know, when we lost our first teeth, and then that whole game of the rat, whatever, giving you money, was that a sort of manipulation, or just confusing the whole thing?
I don't think it was manipulation. I feel like what I think manipulation is you doing something that is against your will. Like you, in the grand scheme of things, you didn't want to do that thing, but because someone sweet talked you or guilt tripped you or did something, you end up doing it. I think that's manipulation.
But they manipulated us to lose our teeth. Remember, they'll tell you ganye.
Not quite. I think they were doing us a good service, because if you didn't shake your tooth, if you didn't take it out, then the tooth would. I don't know what that thing is called in English, but another tooth would go on top of that milk tooth. So I don't think that was manipulation. It was just, I think, a trick of
tricking. Yes, that's how they.
You can maybe I guess.
Yes, that's how they manipulate us. Because you would have just sat me down and told me, you know what? this is what happens.
I feel like the reason they said shake your tooth so that a rat gives you money is to just motivate you to take that tooth out because it is for your own good. But manipulation for me, I don't think is when people do things for your own good. They do things for their own good.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
So I think also one of the experiences with manipulation is it makes you a people pleaser. Because it makes you a people pleaser, but you also lack boundaries because you're always swayed to do someone else's
for
bidding.
The other party,
Yes, instead of what you genuinely want. And families are interesting things, interesting spaces to be in. And every family has its own dynamic, how they do their things, how they experience each other. It's so different. I have experienced manipulation before, but I think mainly for my siblings. Because first of all, they know I could do anything for them. Like they now do anything for them. So they sometimes manipulate me to do things for them.
In which way?
I can't even think of something at the top of my head. But they just know that Tracy is always there for us.
So I can do anything. Concoct anything.
Exactly. But these days I'm very good with boundaries. I'm very good with my no. And it shocks them so much. They're like, what? You mean that chick said no? Like, Tracy, how dare you? But it's good for me because now I find that I have more space, more time for myself.
True.
Because previously it would be work, family.
And you
work,
have your
family.
peace.
But now I have more space for myself. And I even realized that the more space I have to be with myself is the better I show up for the people I love. Because I then have time to pour into my cup, to take care of myself, to be just by myself. And because I am healthy and I'm happy, then that is how I also end up showing up in the world because I'm not pouring from an empty cup. Yeah.
Sounds good. About manipulation, I think it reminds me of our parents that give you this excuse of so everything good has to come to me. So you find that you're always inclined to be on their part out of that whole thing of olimwana wange. Omanyo mwana waluma.
I feel like it's unfair. And maybe I'll be cancelled for this, I don't know. It's unfair for parents to have expectations of their children. But it's not unfair for children to have expectations from their parents. Do you know why? As a parent, you chose to keep a pregnancy
and give birth
to a child. You must look after that child. Must give them the basics.
True.
But as a child, I didn't choose to be given birth to.
I didn't choose you as a parent.
Exactly. So I don't owe you anything. So I think, and it's mainly in I don't know about other dynamics, but in African, I feel like in African situations, like that example you've given, so you need to do things for me. There was even a video of some guy that I saw sometime on social media where the guy went to the son's shop and he was quarreling and calling the
I think I saw it on TikTok.
And I'm like, yes, as a child, it would be good for you to be able to take care of your parents when they grow older, because they took you to school, they gave you the tools to be able to be who you are now. But you don't owe them anything. No one in this world owes you anything. Like nobody actually owes you anything in this world. And especially, I don't think children owe parents anything. Like you owe your parents, of course, you owe them respect. You owe them, care, you owe them basic human decency, you owe them kindness, but you're not supposed to look after them. That's not your duty. But children who end up looking after their parents do it because of love. But also you as a parent, you need to kwekuba touch and see, why isn't this child wanting to look after me? Because ideally, all of us children want to look after our parents. We want to make sure that the good life that they gave us, we are also able to return that. So as a parent, if your child decides to cut you off, as a parent, if your child decides to be like, I don't want to look after you, I don't want to even know whether you're alive or not, you're the problem.
Wow.
You're the problem. You did something to this child when they were growing up that made them think that, when I grow up, I'm going to cut this aspect of my family off because they are not a safe space for me. They are toxic to me. So for me, I think it's on the parent to look at themselves and be like, what did I do not to nurture a beautiful relationship with this child that makes them not want to take care of me when I'm old?
Well, I think that comes from our parents being emotionally unavailable because the African system or the African parent, the Ugandan parents, their role was to just bring you up. As long as you have the basic needs, and that's it. Nkusasulide school fees or so they actually missed out on the affectionate side of a man telling your kid that you love them. Even here,
some people have never had that word from their parents.
Yes,
that I love you.
Yeah, so like all the small things did not create the bond and the intimate side. So you find that when a kid grows up, how you treated them when they were a kid is how they treat you when they grow up.
And what's funny with some parents is when you're younger, there's a lot of animosity. There's a lot of, I am your parent, you're my child.
Yeah.
I'll pay school fees, I'll do all these things and not nurture the emotional aspect of our relationship.
Yeah.
And then when you grow up, then they want to be your best friends. And you're like,
thank you.
Unfortunately,
it doesn't work like that.
The ship has sailed. Like, we can't be friends if you didn't nurture that friendship from when we were young.
Yes.
So you can't expect me to want to come home on the weekend, to sit with you, to go out with you, to call you and check on you, because our relationship then becomes just transactional. That when I was younger, you paid fees, you took me to the hospital, you did ABCD. That was transactional, no emotions involved. Yeah. So also you, when you grow up, I'm going to take you to hospital, I'll send food home, but I'm not going to come and spend my weekend at home with you.
Because there was nothing.
There's no relationship there. What are we going to talk about? We are hardly friends. I think for me, one thing my parents have really, really done for us as kids is try to understand each of us individually. Like, we are so many kids, but one thing is they understand each of us separately from the bigger group, and they've nurtured those relationships. Like, I could sit with my dad, I could sit with my mom, and we'll talk about everything under the sun, but just because a relationship has been nurtured, they care to find out how you are, how are you feeling. You mentioned this friend of yours, you and her had a fight. How is that going? How, like, they were able to try to nurture a relationship with us, and it's working for them. Because when we go out with them, it's like we are friends. Like, of course, the boundary of them being our parents and us being the children is there. But for the most part, we are friends. It's not a thing of, how in some families, when they hear daddy is coming, everyone scatters. Yeah. For us, it's like we are excited to see them. We're excited to hang out with them. Yeah. We go out with my parents to the club, for instance, and people are like, what?
Are you hanging with your mosaic?
Yeah, but no, we are actually friends. Because I know my parents don't judge me. They understand who I am. They meet me at the point where I feel love. So yeah.
Well, you've heard it from Ivy. Parents, you're not entitled. And kids, you have to actually work on a smooth relationship with your kids and not just attack them when they're adults, we have to be best friends. How? That reminds
maybe just
me.
Also to say, parents and children are not supposed to be, I don't want to say not supposed to be. Parents and children, there has to be a clear distinction. There's a parent and there's a child. And as a parent, I have to parent. As a child, you have to child.
Yes.
But as a parent, you're not a robot, right? You're not a robot. This child is also a human being. This child also has emotions. This child also has needs, right? So in as much as you want to parent them, you want to be strict, which is not a bad thing. You want to be able to create boundaries with them. You want to nurture a kind and respectful child. That's okay. But it's important that you also that you touch the emotional aspects of that child, right?
Sure
that some children are sensitive, for example, right? Some children, maybe it's hard for them to open up, right? How are you able as a parent to nurture that emotional aspect of your child
while also,
while also remaining a parent? For instance, do you know your children's friends? Do you know your child's favorite color? Do you know the things that keep your child awake at night? Do you know your child's dreams, right? Some people, you're forced into your 𝙃𝙪 Kumbe, you are creative. Kumbe, if we nurtured your talent as a dancer, you would be an amazing dancer right now. So yeah, I think there should be a distinction between parenting and being a child, but you also have to nurture the emotional aspect of your child and make them your friend. Yeah.
Well, to just add on that, you see, the way parents raised us then, I think they're just following a system of how they were raised. So some of them actually are new to these things. When you tell somebody, I want to be your friend, mom, we should have these connections, they're like, how? The mama wange,
gentle parenting.
the mama wange, like they give you, so they give you the stories of then and what they know. So they just, I think sometimes we have to actually extend grace, because they also tried to raise us how they knew how, and they're trying to mitigate life. It's also their first time being alive. So we have to put two and two together and just, I think, extend grace where we can. But then also, parents, please work on relationships with your kids. And then just remind you're not entitled to their wealth.
Just like kids are not entitled to their parents' wealth.
Oh yeah, I remember Dad telling us wano wange wemala mujavao naye si wamwe. Hardcore. Then
you mentioned that thing of extending grace to our parents. I think this is something we've talked about even before. That for me, understanding my parents came from understanding that also them is their first time on
being
earth.
alive.
It's their first time on earth. It's their first time. It was their first time as young adults. It's their first time as parents. They actually don't have any manual.
The world.
And unlike us, I feel like our generation is going to be a generation of better parents
because we
have tools. But also we have tools, we have information, which our parents didn't have. They didn't have internet. They didn't have books on parenting. They didn't have space to give feedback. But us, we are different generation.
Not all of them. There are people who have grown up in families. They've been on a soft slat.
I would say so, but like, I'll give you an example. We talk about my dad a lot. He also didn't have the tools. He just, I guess, chose to just be different. But also him, in that difference, he also made a number of mistakes. But I don't hold him or my mom or anybody to those standards, to any high standards anymore, because I acknowledge that, you know what, this is their first time on earth. They are just doing what they know. But you also said the blueprint they had was of their parents.
Exactly.
Which was even more toxic than what we are facing now. So, extend them grace, by the way.
Yeah, and there is something I didn't tackle on the first episode, and a colleague mentioned family, it's abuse, sexual abuse. We've seen stories around of my uncle raped me, and then I could not come and say it because what happens in family stays in family, and you've grown up with that wound because you can't just stand and talk about your uncle like that because family has been trying to like be so protective. How do you address that?
Okay, that is definitely a running theme in very many African homes.
Especially you who's an activist.
Yeah, very many African homes of if there's been sexual abuse in the home, they're like, bino bya wakati kolechi to be. But that saying perpetuates a lot of violence. In fact, us who know a little bit about sexual violence, most of the sexual violence that happens to people it is done by people they know. So your brother, your uncle, your father, your cousin, your friend. That's usually the person who's going to abuse you first. It is very, very dangerous when we say that if your uncle rapes you, your father, your mother, your caretakers are the ones supposed to first be the first space of protection for you by first of all taking him to jail. And I've had so many stories where someone will say, my uncle raped me and they didn't say anything, and he also raped my cousin. When you let bad people get away with doing bad things, they'll continue doing them because they know that there are no consequences. It is very, very, very harmful. Also, some people get abused in homes, even by maids. They get molested by maids and things like that. But if you as a parent, you're not a safe space for your child, the other thing we talked about where your child can't even come and talk to you. You've not created a space of conversation in your home. So if I get raped, of course I'm not going to come and talk to you because I know first of all you won't believe me.
True that.
Number one, because every time I come to you about something, you're always going to take the side of the other person and not hear my side of the story. So many people have gone through sexual violence at home and decided to keep quiet because they're like, even if I tell these people, they're going to say I'm the bad one. They won't believe me. Right? But also as a parent, the thing we talked about, the things parents owe to their children is protection.
Yeah.
You must protect your child. The kind of people you bring into your home, you must vet them.
Who are they come from?
You know, when we were younger, my dad hated us. He didn't allow us to go for sleepovers. And I always didn't I'm like, why everyone is going for sleepovers at everyone's home? People come back from holidays, they say, I went for a sleepover at XYZ person's home. And my dad, he put his foot down on that and he said, you will not go for sleepovers anywhere.
Yeah.
It's
because he wanted to shield you from something.
And I'm like, wait, this guy was actually protecting us from very, very many things. You know, in sleepovers, by the way, is where some children experience sexual violence. Yeah. Which homes are you taking these kids to? Do you know those people, right?
You need to do quality control.
So as a parent, you need to do a lot of quality control. You need to protect your child. But also, how do you protect your child is by creating a space for them where they can be able to come and speak to you in case someone tries to do anything, tries to violate them in any way. They are very quick to come and talk to you as a parent. Another thing I also want to talk about is, as parents, maybe our generation of parents, they were shy to talk to us about our bodies, right? They could not call, they would call, I don't know whether I'm allowed to say that on the podcast, but a vagina.
As you doesn't come for us.
A vagina is a vagina. Why are you telling a baby that it is a flower, that it is a sweet, that it is a what? No. But also try to teach children body boundaries, right? That these parts of your body are yours.
Yes.
And if anybody touches those parts of your body, come and tell mommy, come and tell daddy. When do you let your children begin showering themselves, for example? Because that is also part of creating boundaries and telling them, now you are a big girl.
You can go
it's time for you to bathe yourself.
And also have their separate bathrooms.
I might come and supervise to see that you've cleaned properly, but it is your body, it is you who's supposed to clean it. Name body parts as they actually are. And then try to take children through body boundary exercises and say, this one is the head. So who can touch the head? Maybe the aunt who's going to plait your hair in the salon when they're washing your hair. This part here, who's supposed to touch it? This part here, who's supposed to touch it? How do you take care of it? So that a child grows knowing that, this part is a boundary area.
Yes.
This part, mommy said or daddy said, don't touch this part, right? That is also how one of the ways you can prevent sexual violence in the home. Of course, there's only so much you can do, but you can start somewhere.
A good point. That reminds me of something. When we were growing up, of course, this whole sexual topic was more like a taboo. So parents don't tell you that don't have sex, but they just tell you to stay away from boys. So some of us grew up until campus, you fear men because they told you to keep away from boys. And when this whole sexual thing comes in, you're trying to break your virginity, you have that fear. You get up to now,
allegedly.
But because we skipped this whole talk of our dad would be like, "Again, they were saying and then some of our aunties were not really in our lives to insert some of these things. And then even when they were, they'll just tell us to pull. You know those things of pulling? So they just talk about pulling and you're like, why am I pulling? They're not even explaining to you. So you miss all this you miss a lot. Then when you go out there, you're trying to experiment and you get this guy, you don't know. Literally, it's try and error until, oh God, it never stops. But because we missed a lot of that education, sex talk education. Yet it's different with kids now. Kids tell you, hey, you had sex. So they're just free with that language. And then we are saying it of banange. This is too much. So I think it's important. So
I feel like, and even in Uganda, number one of the things we need is sexuality education in Uganda. Comprehensive sexuality education in that children get age-appropriate information. Of course, you're not going to get a 2-year-old and start telling them, this is sex, this is what is involved in sex, this is what sex this is how sex happens, etc. Of course not. But comprehensive sexuality education means that it is going to be age appropriate. That at maybe the ages of 0 to like maybe 4 or 5, you begin talking to the child about their body, about the things we talked about body boundaries, about the what does this body part do.
But wait, there is reproduction in primary. I don't know which level is that. It's not
comprehensive enough because at least from what I remember, what we studied about reproduction, we talked about menstruation and adolescence. Simple as that. But that is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to our sexual and reproductive health, right? Things to do with infections. Who taught you about infections, for example? Nobody. You know, even when we talk about menstruation, we're only told what happens in the body. They didn't tell you about cramps. They didn't tell about nausea. They didn't tell about migraines. They didn't tell about any of those things. Back pain. So you're experiencing them and you're thinking, what the hell is happening to my body? So even if we are taught it in primary, it's not comprehensive. There has to be a separate aspect of comprehensive sexuality education that you're going to teach children, you know, things to do with, in Uganda, these days, children begin having sex very, very early. But nobody talks to them about things to do with the message is abstinence. What happens if the child can't abstain? Because we know that many of them are actually not abstaining, right? But you're not talking to them about contraceptive use. You're not talking to them about HIV prevention and care.
Condoms.
You're not talking exactly. So you're actually not protecting this child. You're just perpetuating a lot of negative things that are going to happen to them because of lack of information.
Well, speaking of that, I think one of the reasons as to why maybe parents don't, or even the whole education sector, because they try to shield us from a lot of information, which generations have changed. You get now. The system then didn't have like technology, but now you can actually Google something and be like, okay. So there's a lot of information that we can actually access on our own, which we missed by the people who were actually supposed to.
A funny joke I always give is threats used to work for our generation. Don't have sex early because you will get pregnant. Don't have sex early because you get HIV.
Actually, it was about don't.
These days, that information doesn't work for children these days.
They're like, let me try it.
Let me try. And the funny thing with the human brain, when you tell me don't, I will do because I want to know why are you refusing.
Your curiosity goes
exactly.
to level.
So even how we parent has to be different. Like the messages that we are giving to young people that are in our lives, we have to use a different approach. The things that worked for us honestly can't work anymore. How children were raised 20 years ago, 30 years ago, it can't work in this generation anymore. And maybe going back to what we were talking about parenting of our parents' era and their parents, is they didn't have a good blueprint. They didn't have good examples of good parenting. But we do. You might not have come from a good household, a good family,
but you're responsible.
But now that you know what a bad household looks like, you also know what a good household can look like. So it is on you to just break that chain, that chain of, at home we shout at each other. Some people are very bad communicators.
At home we don't talk.
At home we don't talk because they know that you only communicate through shouting. Right? So you now who knows that shouting does not put a message across, it is on you now when you have children that it will be a space of communication that no, in this house we don't shout. In this house we don't beat each other. In this house we don't beat each other. Like we express our emotions through talking and not through punches. It shows even in the cycle of violence. Children who have grown up in violent situations end up also either being in violent situations or being violent themselves. So it is on you to realize that, what, my father used to beat my mother, or my mother used to beat my father, but now I know better, so I'm going to stop.
Do different.
Every time I get the urge to want to throw a punch, I'm going to pull myself back. Some of you need to go for anger management classes. Some of you need to start therapy as soon as yesterday because you have so many issues. But most of those issues are because of how you grew up.
And the familiar circumstances that they know. Banange, we've talked much. We've expounded deeper into even like solutions. Well, that's it from us. Thank you for tuning in. For those that want to have the same conversation or want to get this good information, you can do that by subscribing on the link below and join the Being Human platform. Thank you for watching.
Bye.
Thank you for watching.
Bye.
Can we repeat that?
I think it was good.